On a small unknown planet, a human named Mark found himself stranded after a disastrous crash. His spaceship, once a symbol of Earth's technological prowess, was now reduced to nothing more than twisted metal scattered across the alien landscape. Mark had no idea how far he was from home, but he knew he couldn't stay in the wreckage for long. The planet was harsh. Unforgiving winds, unfamiliar plants, and the constant feeling of being watched. Mark had always been the kind of person who kept calm in dangerous situations. He had been trained for this, after all. He set up a small camp near the wreckage, using his survival skills to gather food and make a shelter. Each day was spent searching for any signs of life or a way to repair his ship, but so far nothing had been found. He couldn't help but feel a little lonely. Being the only human on a strange planet, he longed for the familiar sounds of Earth, the chatter of people, and the comfort of home. One evening, as Mark sat by a small fire he'd made, a soft sound caught his attention. It was faint, barely noticeable against the howling wind, but it was there, a rustling in the bushes. Mark tensed, instinctively reaching for his weapon, but he didn't want to make any rash decisions. It could just be an animal or the wind, playing tricks. But the sound grew louder, closer, and Mark couldn't ignore it any longer. He stood up, cautiously approaching the source of the noise. The bushes parted, and out stepped a figure unlike anything he had ever seen before. She was tall and slender, with soft lavender skin that seemed to shimmer in the fading light of the sun. Her eyes were a deep, almost glowing shade of violet, filled with curiosity and a hint of fear. Mark's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful, but her presence was unlike any human he had ever encountered. The alien girl looked at him, with wide, innocent eyes, her hands raised in a peaceful gesture. She didn't seem hostile, just lost, like him. For a moment, Mark forgot everything else. He wasn't sure if she was real, or if the loneliness of the planet was playing tricks on his mind. "Hello," he said, his voice careful but steady. The alien girl blinked at him, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Hello," she repeated softly, her voice melodic and strange to his ears. Mark took a step back, unsure of how to react. He had never encountered an alien before. He had heard stories, of course, but they never seemed real. This, however, was undeniably real, a real alien standing right in front of him. She seemed as confused as he was, her gaze flickering from him to the wreckage of his ship. "You are not from here?" she asked. Mark nodded. "No, I crashed. My ship is broken. I'm stuck here for now." The girl tilted her head, considering his words carefully. She took a tentative step closer, her bare feet making no sound on the ground. Mark's heart raced, unsure of what she might do next. He had no idea what her intentions were. I am lost too," she whispered. "I was sent here, but I am not meant to be here. My people—" She stopped herself as if unsure how to continue. Mark could tell she wasn't from around here. Her clothes were unlike anything he'd ever seen, made of a material that glimmered in the light like stardust. Her accent was unlike anything on Earth, but there was an underlying sadness in her words. "Do you need help?" Mark asked. The question seemed simple enough, but there was a strange weight to it. The alien girl looked at him with wide eyes, her expression a mixture of hope and hesitation. She nodded slowly, but then her voice faltered. "I am afraid, alone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark could feel the weight of her words. He understood loneliness all too well. He had been alone for days, stranded on a foreign planet with no idea when or if rescue would come. But this girl, this alien, seemed different. Her vulnerability was raw, and for the first time in a long while, Mark felt the need to protect someone, even if she was from another world. Before he could say anything, the girl took another step, closer, her face softening as she gazed at him. "Will you let me stay with you?" Her voice was almost a plea, a request so simple yet so desperate. Mark stared at her, caught off guard by her words. It was a strange request, but in a way, it made sense. She was lost, just like him. They were both stranded in a vast, unfamiliar world. surrounded by nothing but danger and uncertainty. "Stay with me?" Mark repeated, his voice unsure. He had only just met her, but the loneliness he had been feeling seemed to pull him toward her, urging him to offer her some comfort. The girl nodded, her violet eyes never leaving his. "I don't want to be alone." Mark didn't know what to say. There was something about her, a quiet, vulnerable presence, that made him feel protective. It wasn't just her beauty or her otherworldly appearance, it was the raw honesty in her eyes. She wasn't like the creatures he had imagined when he thought of aliens. She was just a girl, lost and alone, asking for help. "All right," Mark said, his voice steady now. "You can stay, but we need to be careful. I don't know what else is out there." The alien girl smiled, her eyes softening. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time since the crash, Mark felt like he wasn't entirely alone anymore. As they sat down together by the fire, Mark couldn't help but wonder what this strange encounter meant. Who was she? Where had she come from? And what did she mean when she said she wasn't supposed to be here? But for now, those questions didn't matter. She was with him. And for that moment, that was enough. The night was cold, and the stars above twinkled like tiny diamonds scattered across the sky. Mark sat by the fire, the warmth from the flames comforting him after a long, exhausting day. He glanced over at the alien girl, who had curled up next to the fire, her lavender skin glowing softly in the dim light. Despite her otherworldly appearance, she looked strangely at ease. Her violet eyes, which had once seemed so full of fear, were now calm and peaceful. Mark's thoughts were still racing. He had never imagined his life would lead him to an alien world, let alone that he'd be sharing a fire with an alien girl who had no clear explanation for why she was here. Her words echoed in his mind. "I am lost too." As the fire crackled, the girl sat up, her long silver hair shifting like liquid. She studied the flames for a moment, then looked over at Mark. Her voice, though soft, broke the silence. "I'm Nira," she said. "What is your name?" Mark blinked, surprised. He had forgotten to ask. "Mark," he replied. "Nice to meet you, Nira." She smiled gently, and Mark felt a small wave of relief. Her smile was genuine, though it carried a sense of sadness, as if she too was longing for something she couldn't quite explain. "I don't know how I got here," Nira said quietly, her eyes lowering to the ground. "I was sent by my people." She hesitated as though searching for the right words. "I didn't want to come. I don't want to be here." Mark listened intently, leaning forward slightly. "What do you mean? You're from another planet, right?" Nira nodded. "Yes, I am. My people, we are very different from humans. We don't feel the way you do. We don't understand your emotions, your struggles." She paused, a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or sorrow. "I was supposed to bring knowledge, peace. But I don't think they wanted me to succeed." Mark was puzzled, but something about Nira's words touched him. She seemed so lost. Not just in this place, but in her own world too. He could see the weight of her mission, the confusion in her eyes, as if she had been forced into something she didn't understand or want. "How long have you been here?" Mark asked. "Days, weeks?" "Time is strange here," Nira said, her voice trailing off. "I'm not sure. I only remember the journey, the endless traveling from one place to another. Then, I woke up here." Mark nodded, trying to process everything she had said. He had always thought of aliens as cold and distant, but Nira was different. She was just a person, like him, thrown into a world she didn't understand. And like him, she was searching for a way to make sense of it all. "I think I understand a little," Mark said after a moment. "I'm stuck here too. I crashed. My ship's destroyed and I have no way of getting home." Nira turned her gaze to him, her violet eyes locking with his. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wish I could help you." Mark shrugged, trying to keep his tone light. "It's not your fault," I'll find a way out. But it's a little easier now that you're here. Nira looked at him in surprise. Why? Mark smiled slightly. Because I'm not alone anymore. Nira looked away, her expression unreadable for a moment. She seemed to be wrestling with something inside her, as though there was more she wanted to say, but couldn't find the words. After a few moments, Nira spoke again, her voice quieter now. Your world is beautiful, Mark. I can feel it. The way you see things. The way you care for each other. Mark raised an eyebrow. You can feel that? Nira nodded. Yes. It's not the same as how we feel. My people are different. We don't care for things the way humans do. But when I saw you, when I saw how you looked after your ship, your surroundings, I felt something. I felt the warmth, the care. Mark wasn't sure how to respond. He had never thought of himself as special, but hearing Nira speak about his world like that made him realize just how different their lives must be. And yet here they were in the middle of an alien landscape sharing the same fire. What about you? Mark asked, curious. How does your people's care work? I don't mean to sound rude, but how can a whole species not care for things? Nira looked at him, her eyes wide as if she hadn't expected the question. It's hard to explain. My people don't form connections like you do. We don't need to. We're all part of something bigger, something we can't see but we know is there. Everything is connected and we don't feel the need to make individual bonds. Mark frowned. That sounds lonely. Nira's eyes darkened for a moment and she nodded slowly. It is. But we don't know it. We don't understand what we're missing until we see it. She looked up at him. I think I understand it now. Mark wasn't sure what to say to that. It was strange to hear her talk about her people as if they were disconnected from everything, from life itself. He couldn't imagine living in a world where you didn't care about others, didn't need to form bonds with anyone. But it was clear that Nira was different. She wasn't like her people. There was something about her, something that made her more human than he had expected an alien to be. As the night went on, Mark and Nira continued to talk, sharing their thoughts and experiences. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments of silence as they tried to find a way to communicate their worlds to each other. But little by little, they began to understand each other in ways they hadn't thought possible. As the fire burned low, Mark looked over at Nira, who had once again curled up on the ground beside him, her lavender skin glowing softly in the dim light. She looked peaceful, but there was still a sadness in her eyes, a longing for something she couldn't quite reach. Mark, Nira whispered after a long pause. Thank you for not leaving me alone. Mark smiled gently. I think we both needed someone to be here. And in that moment, as the stars continued to shine above them, Mark knew that their journey, whatever it was, had only just begun. The days on the alien planet passed by in a strange blur. Mark had grown accustomed to the quiet, but it wasn't the silence that troubled him. It was the uncertainty of the future. Every morning, he and Nira would wake up to the same barren landscape, the distant horizon always seeming just a little out of reach. They spent their time searching for resources, keeping watch for any signs of danger, and sharing stories of their worlds. Mark found comfort in Nira's company, but there was always an underlying tension in the air, something unsaid between them. Nira had become more open over time, but she still carried a heavy sadness in her eyes. She would often stare off into the distance, lost in thoughts that Mark couldn't begin to understand. It was clear that she wasn't just running from the unknown planet. She was running from something much deeper, something connected to her people, her mission. But what? One afternoon, as they ventured deeper into the alien wilderness in search of food, Mark noticed that Nira seemed more distracted than usual. Her gaze flickered between the surroundings and the ground beneath her feet, and she walked with an unusual hurry, as if trying to avoid something. Mark decided it was time to ask. Nira, he called, his voice gentle but firm. What's going on? You've been acting strange. She paused for a moment, her back to him, before slowly turning around. There was a look of hesitation in her eyes, as if she was deciding whether or not to tell him the truth. I have to tell you something, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something I should have said earlier. Mark raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. He stepped closer to her, his heart suddenly pounding in his chest. What is it? You can tell me. Nira glanced around, her eyes scanning their surroundings as though she feared being overheard. There was a tension in the air that Mark couldn't shake, a sense that something was about to change. I was sent here, Nira began, her voice faltering slightly, not by choice. My people, they wanted to observe you, your species. They wanted to learn everything they could about humanity. We've been watching Earth for a long time, Mark. We know about your wars, your struggles, your history. Mark felt a cold chill run down his spine. You've been watching us? You've known about Earth this whole time? Nira nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the ground. Yes, we've been watching, but we never intervened. We never offered help. My people believed that humans were too chaotic, too unpredictable to be of any use. But She hesitated, her eyes locking onto his. I don't agree with them. Mark stood there in stunned silence, trying to process her words. The thought of being watched, of having someone, some alien species, observe humanity without intervening felt wrong, as though they had been treated like lab animals, not fellow beings. Why didn't you say anything before? He asked, his voice low. Why didn't you tell me? Nira's expression softened with regret. Because I didn't want you to hate me. I didn't want you to see me as just another alien from a race that looks down on humans. But now, I don't know what else to do. I can't go back to them, Mark. They'll punish me for what I've done. They'll make me pay for going against their mission. Mark could hear the pain in her voice. This wasn't just about a simple mission or being sent to Earth. This was about a deep, personal conflict within Nira herself. She wasn't like her people, and she didn't believe in the mission she had been given. You don't have to go back, Mark said softly, his voice filled with determination. You're not alone. You can stay here with me if you want. We'll figure this out. Nira looked up at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite identify. Hope, maybe. But there was still a hint of fear behind it. But what? If they come for me? She asked. What if they follow me here? I can't let you be dragged into this. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Mark stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. If they come, we'll face them together. You're not going through this alone. I'm here for you. Nira's eyes shimmered with emotion, and for a moment it seemed as though she might break down, but she quickly regained her composure, taking a deep breath and wiping away a tear that had formed in the corner of her eye. You really mean that? She whispered. Mark nodded. I do. For a moment, there was a silence between them, the weight of their words hanging heavy in the air. But then Nira finally allowed herself to smile, a small but genuine smile that lit up her face in a way that made Mark's heart race. Thank you, Mark, she said softly. Thank you for understanding. Just as Mark was about to respond, a sudden noise broke the peaceful moment. The ground beneath them trembled slightly and a loud hum filled the air, a sound that was unmistakable. Mark's heart skipped a beat as he looked up at Nira. They're here, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They've found me. Mark's pulse quickened. He didn't know who they were, but the look in Nira's eyes told him everything he needed to know. Her people were here, and they were not going to let her go easily. Before Mark could react, a shadow passed overhead. A massive ship, sleek and dark, hovered above them. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The ship's engines roared as it descended toward the ground, sending a gust of wind and dust swirling around them. Nira turned to Mark, her face pale with fear. We have to go. Now. Mark grabbed her hand, his mind racing. He didn't know how to fight these aliens or even how to escape, but he wasn't about to let Nira face this alone. Not after everything she had shared with him. They had to run, and fast. With no time to waste, They turned and sprinted through the alien wilderness, the sound of the ship's engines growing louder behind them. Mark knew they didn't have much time before the aliens caught up to them. But as he looked at Nira, he knew one thing for certain. They weren't going to stop fighting until they were free. The alien ship loomed overhead, its dark silhouette casting a long shadow across the ground. Mark and Nira ran as fast as they could, pushing through the thick underbrush and uneven terrain, their hearts pounding in their chests. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder, and Mark could feel the weight of their pursuit closing in on them. The aliens from Nira's world were not far behind. He had no idea how many there were or what they wanted, but he knew they were dangerous. Nira's grip on his hand was tight, but she was pulling ahead, her alien senses allowing her to navigate the wilderness faster than Mark could manage. He struggled to keep up, his breath coming in sharp gasps. His mind raced, but he had no plan, no clear idea of how to escape. "Where are we going?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do you know where we can hide?" Nira didn't answer at first, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her face was pale, and there was a cold fear in her eyes that Mark hadn't seen before. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know this place. But we have to find cover. They can track me. I can't let them catch me, Mark. They'll take me back. They'll punish me." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. He knew that the bond they shared was more than just survival. It was a connection that neither of them had fully understood until now. Nira was not just an alien girl stranded on a foreign planet. She was someone who had gone against everything her people had taught her. She had chosen humanity over the cold logic of her species. And now, she was being hunted for it. They stumbled through the thick underbrush, their legs aching from the effort. Mark tried to focus on the task at hand, survival. But his mind kept drifting back to Nira. He had never imagined he would be in this situation, running for his life with an alien girl who had turned his world upside down. "Nira, you're not alone," he said, his voice firm. "I won't let them take you back. We'll find a way out of this." Nira glanced at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. "I wish I could believe that," she said softly. "But I don't know if we can escape them. They are powerful. They won't stop until they have me." Mark clenched his fists, determination hardening within him. "Then we'll fight. We'll do whatever it takes. I'm not letting them take you." For a moment, Nira looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face. She seemed to hesitate as though weighing his words. Then slowly she nodded. "I don't want to fight," she whispered, "but I don't want to go back to them either." As they continued to run, the ground beneath them shook again, and a loud crackling sound echoed through the air. Mark glanced over his shoulder to see the alien ship descending lower, its massive engines sending shockwaves through the trees. The ship was getting closer. The hunt was getting tighter. "We need to hide," Mark said urgently. "Now." Nira nodded and turned to lead the way. She pushed through the dense trees and vines, weaving expertly through the alien landscape. Mark followed closely behind, doing his best to keep up. But it was clear they were running out of time. Finally, after what felt like hours, Nira stopped abruptly in front of a large rock formation. She pressed her hand against the cold stone, and Mark watched in confusion as the rock shifted slightly, revealing a narrow passageway hidden behind the boulders. "Here," Nira said, her voice low but urgent. "This way." Mark didn't hesitate. He followed her into the hidden passage, his heart racing. The air inside the passage was cooler, and the narrow walls pressed in on them as they moved deeper into the darkness. Mark couldn't see much, but he could hear the distant roar of the alien ship above them, the sound of their pursuers searching for them in the wilderness. They finally reached the end of the passage where the rocks opened up into a small, hidden cave. The walls of the cave were lined with strange, glowing crystals that cast an eerie light across the space. Mark couldn't help but be fascinated by the sight, but there was no time to admire the beauty of the place. They had to keep moving. Nira collapsed onto the ground, her breath coming in heavy gasps. Mark dropped beside her, his body aching from the run. They both sat in silence for a moment, catching their breath and listening for any signs of pursuit. The cave was quiet now, but Mark knew they couldn't stay here forever. "What now?" he asked, his voice strained. Nira closed her eyes, her face filled with weariness. "We wait. We have to stay hidden until they pass. But I don't know if it will be enough." Mark placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her what little comfort he could. "We'll make it, Nira. I won't let them hurt you." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sound of their pursuers slowly faded, but the fear remained. Mark knew that even though they had found a momentary shelter, the danger wasn't over. Nira's people would stop at nothing to bring her back, and they would stop at nothing to prevent her from forming connections with humans. He could see it in her eyes, the weight of her people's expectations, the burden of her mission. But there was something else in her eyes too, something that had grown stronger since they had first met. A bond. A connection that had started as mere survival had turned into something more. Something Mark couldn't explain, but something he couldn't ignore. "I've never felt this way before," Nira said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what it is, but I feel it too. With you." Mark looked at her, surprised by the raw honesty in her words. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Nira said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose you." Mark felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't know how to respond. All he knew was that the bond they shared was something neither of them had expected. It was more than just companionship. It was a connection that defied everything they had been taught about their worlds. "I'm not going anywhere," Mark said softly. "I'm with you, Nira. Always." For a moment, Nira's eyes softened, and she smiled faintly. It was the first real smile Mark had seen from her in days, and it filled him with hope. But even as they shared this moment of peace, Mark knew the danger wasn't over. They were still being hunted, still running for their lives. And as much as he wished they could stay hidden in the cave forever, he knew that the fight was just beginning. The hours seemed to stretch into days as Mark and Nira remained hidden in the cave, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they couldn't stay hidden forever. The distant sound of the alien ship had faded, but the tension between them was thick. Every time Mark heard a rustle in the trees or a distant hum in the air, his muscles tensed. He knew the aliens were still out there, searching for them, and it was only a matter of time before they found them. Nira sat on the ground, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes staring into the glowing crystals that lined the cave walls. She had barely spoken since they'd arrived, and Mark could see that she was deep in thought. The weight of the decision she had to make was clear on her face. He knew she was torn between staying with him, someone she had come to care for, and returning to her people, who would undoubtedly punish her for defying their mission. "Nira," Mark said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "What are you thinking about?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with the fabric of her clothing. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her words carrying the weight of 1,000 thoughts. "I don't know if I should go back. My people, they'll never forgive me. They'll never accept me after what I've done. But staying here with you..." Her voice trailed off, and she shook her head as though she couldn't quite express what she was feeling. Mark sat down beside her, his eyes fixed on her face. He could see the internal struggle that was tearing her apart. She was caught between two worlds, one that she had been born into, and one that she had come to understand through her time with him. And he knew that whatever choice she made, it would not be an easy one. "You don't have to go back," Mark said, his voice firm. "You don't owe them anything, Nira. If you want to stay here, if you want to be with me, then we'll find a way. We'll build a life here. You don't have to go back to a world that doesn't understand you." Nira's eyes met his, and for a moment Mark saw a flicker of hope in them, hope that had been missing ever since they first met. But it was quickly replaced by doubt. "I wish it were that simple," she whispered. I wish I could just forget. Everything. My people, my mission, but I can't. I can't just walk away from everything I've been taught. I've spent my whole life preparing for this mission, and now I don't know if I even believe in it anymore. Mark reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. You don't have to choose between your past and your future. You can make your own path, Nira. You've already shown me what it means to care. I've never met anyone like you before. You've already changed my world. Nira's breath caught in her throat, and she looked down at their hands, her fingers entwined with his. She seemed to draw strength from the simple touch, and for the first time in a long while she looked less afraid. But what if I'm not strong enough to leave it all behind? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. What if I can't be who I want to be because of what I was raised to believe? Mark squeezed her hand, his voice steady. You are strong, Nira. I've seen it in you, every day since we met. The strength to question, the strength to choose your own path. It's not easy, and it's not going to be perfect, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. Nira turned to him, her face softening. Her violet eyes, once filled with doubt and fear, now held something different, something like trust. She leaned in, just slightly, as if her heart was finally allowing her to believe in what Mark was offering her. I don't know what the future holds, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, but for the first time I don't feel so alone. Mark smiled gently, his heart swelling with relief. You're not alone, Nira. You don't have to be. We'll face whatever comes together. As they sat there in the dim light of the cave, Mark felt a shift in the air, as though the universe itself had paused to let them breathe. For a moment there were no aliens chasing them, no ship hovering above, no past or future weighing them down. There was only this, the quiet, shared moment between two people who had found something in each other that neither had expected. But the reality of their situation was never far away. Mark knew that their peaceful moment wouldn't last forever. They had to make a decision. They had to act before it was too late. Do you think they'll give up? Mark asked, his voice quieter now. Do you think they'll stop looking for you? Nira shook her head. No, they won't stop. My people are determined, and they'll keep searching until they find me. And when they do, I'll be forced to return. But I don't want that. I don't want to go back to a life where I don't belong. Mark stood up, his mind racing with options. He couldn't let Nira go back. Not like this. He knew that they had to escape. But where could they go? What could they do? He didn't have all the answers, but he had one thing: his determination to keep Nira safe no matter the cost. We'll have to fight, Mark said, his voice filled with resolve. We'll have to make our stand. I won't let them take you, Nira. Whatever it takes, I'll protect you. Nira looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something that looked like love. She took a deep breath, then nodded. Then let's do it, she said, her voice steady now, no longer filled with doubt. Mark's heart swelled. For the first time since the crash, he felt a glimmer of hope. Real hope. Together, they would face whatever came their way. Together, they would find a way to escape. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the world around them in darkness. The air was cool, but Mark barely noticed as he paced back and forth, his mind racing with plans and ideas. The alien ship was still out there, searching for them, and he knew time was running out. Nira was sitting near the entrance of the cave, her eyes watching the horizon, but her thoughts seemed far away. Mark could sense her anxiety, and he knew it mirrored his own. They had to act soon. We can't stay here forever, Mark said, his voice breaking the silence. We have to leave the cave. It's only a matter of time before they find us. Nira nodded, her gaze still fixed on the distant stars. She had become quieter over the past few days, as if the weight of the decisions she had to make was finally taking its toll. Her people were still out there, still hunting her, and it wasn't just her safety at risk, it was everything she had known. I know, Nira replied softly. But where do we go? I don't know this planet. I don't know what's out there. Mark stopped pacing and turned to face her. He could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty that had never quite left since their journey began. But there was something else there, too. A spark of courage, a sense that she was finally ready to face whatever came next. "We'll figure it out," Mark said, his voice steady. "We don't have to have all the answers right now, but we can't stay hidden forever. We need to move." Nira looked at him then, and for the first time in days, she smiled. A small, cautious smile, but one that meant more than words could express. "I don't know what the future holds, Mark, but I know I don't want to face it alone." Mark stepped closer, his heart lifting at her words. He had been worried about her, about how much pressure she had been under. The idea of running from her people, of abandoning everything she had ever known, couldn't have been easy. But now, in this moment, he saw a glimmer of hope in her. She was ready to take that first step into the unknown, and he would be there to support her. "You won't be alone," Mark said firmly. "We'll face it together." The air in the cave was thick with anticipation. Nira stood up slowly, brushing off the dirt from her clothes. "I think we should go. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to get away. We need to make a plan." Mark nodded. "Agreed. Let's move out while it's still dark. We have the cover of night and we might have a chance to stay ahead of them." As they gathered their things, whatever supplies they could carry, they both knew that there was no turning back. They had made their choice. They were leaving everything behind, and they were doing it together. Once outside the cave, they paused, for a moment to listen. The night was still, but Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something watching them. He glanced at Nira, who was scanning the horizon with the same nervous energy. "We need to stay quiet," Mark whispered. "Let's move as quietly as we can. No sudden movements." Nira nodded and they began walking, carefully making their way through the dense forest. The path was difficult to navigate, but they managed to keep moving without drawing attention. Every crack of a branch underfoot, every rustle of leaves made their hearts race. Mark kept his eyes peeled for any signs of movement in the shadows, but so far, the night was still. Hours passed, and they kept pushing forward, their bodies growing, tired but their resolve strengthening. The sounds of the alien ship had long since disappeared, but Mark knew they couldn't let their guard down. They were still being hunted. At dawn, they reached the edge of a wide, open valley. The view was breathtaking. The sun was rising slowly, over the distant mountains, casting a golden light over the land. It was a new day, a new beginning, but it felt like the calm before the storm. They were out in the open now, and it wouldn't be long before the aliens found them again. Nira stopped at the edge of the valley, her eyes taking in the scene before them. For a moment she stood there, lost in the beauty of the world. It was as though she was seeing it for the first time, as though this strange planet had become her home in ways she hadn't expected. "We have to keep moving," Mark reminded her, his voice soft but insistent. "We can't stop here." But Nira didn't move. Instead, she turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm not running anymore," she said firmly. "We've come this far, Mark. I won't let them take me back. I've made my choice, and I'm not going to live in fear anymore." Mark's heart swelled with admiration for her. He had seen her struggle with her past, with her mission, and with the conflict she felt inside. But now she was standing tall, facing the future head-on. He was proud of her, and he knew, without a doubt, that they could face whatever came next together. "You don't have to run," Mark said softly. "We'll fight, Nira. We'll make our stand together." Nira's eyes softened, and for a moment she looked like the vulnerable alien girl he had first met, lost, afraid, but full of hope. Then she smiled, and Mark saw the person she had become, the person she was always meant to be. "I don't want to fight," Nira said quietly. "But I'm not going back. Not to them. Not to a life I didn't choose." Mark reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Together they stood there watching the sunrise, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road they would walk together. For the first time since the crash, Mark felt a sense of peace. They had chosen their path. They had made their decision. And whatever the future held, they would face it with courage with each other.